The year was 1802, and the city of Alexandria breathed with the restless winds of empire. The harbor groaned with the weight of ships from every corner of the Mediterranean, Ottoman galleys, French brigs, English merchantmen, and Arab dhows, with sails like wings stretched to the sun. The scent of tar, salt, and spice mingled with dust from the desert winds, filling the air with the promise of discovery and the stench of ruin. Among the crowds of traders, sailors, and scholars wandered. A man of 30 years, pale and sharp-eyed, dressed in the sober wool of an English scholar. His name was Edward Blackthorne, a historian who had fled the academic corridors of Oxford for the chaos of the East. He was fascinated by what others dismissed as superstition, maps that lied, relics that cursed, and the forgotten kingdoms that seemed to vanish between the pages of history. On this particular morning, Edward had come to witness the estate auction of an Ottoman merchant, a man rumored to have dealings not only in silk and spice, but in relics smuggled from tombs and temples. The merchant was dead, poisoned, some whispered, and his treasures were to be sold. The crowd pressed into a narrow courtyard, where crates and chests lay stacked like bricks. Edward scanned the objects with little interest until the auctioneer, sweating under his red fez, called attention to a large wooden chest bound in iron. This gentleman, from the late merchant's private quarters. The man shouted, "Contents unknown. Who will start the bidding?" Edward's curiosity stirred when the chest was pried open. Inside, wrapped in faded linen, lay a slab of carved wood, broad as a table, its surface etched with lines, symbols, and miniature ships that seemed to rise from the grain itself. A murmur rippled through the crowd. It was a map, but not drawn with ink, carved and painted, with seas dyed in deep blue, and mountains rising like ridges beneath the fingers. Edward pressed closer, ignoring the cries of the auctioneer. 5 silver pieces! Someone shouted, 8. Countered another, 10. Edward raised his hand, his heart racing. The crowd hesitated. To most, this was no treasure, just an old seafarer's oddity, too bulky to carry, too strange to hang on a wall. The auctioneer, impatient, slammed the gavel. "Sold," to the Englishman. Edward paid quickly, his fingers trembling as he brushed away dust from the wooden map. He recognized the outline of the Red Sea, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Horn of Africa. Yet the details were wrong, or rather different. Towns bore names that did not exist in any atlas, coastlines curved where no coastline should, and across the center of the sea, bold letters marked a place that chilled him, Nos A'd. That night, Edward studied the map by candlelight in his rented quarters. He traced the carved ridges of mountains and the smooth sweep of rivers with reverent care. Ships were etched into the sea, some sinking beneath waves, others sailing proudly. Around the edges ran lines of script, Greek, Arabic, and something older, jagged like Phoenician. Unable to decipher them, Edward sought help. He knew only one person in Alexandria capable of untangling such riddles, Layla al-Nasser, a scholar's daughter who spoke more languages than most men could name. She had once studied under the French savants who came with Napoleon's army, and Edward had found her insight invaluable in his earlier hunts for manuscripts. Layla arrived the next morning, her dark hair tied with a scarf, her eyes bright with curiosity. She bent over the wooden map, tracing the inscriptions. "This is no common seafarer's chart," she whispered. "It is part history, part warning. Look here. These symbols mark not just routes but currents, the winds at certain seasons. And this phrase." She paused, her finger resting on the carved edge. "He who sails to Nos A'd will uncover the throne of tides, but beware the crown of silence." Edward's pulse quickened. A throne? A crown? Could this be a record of a lost kingdom? Layla frowned. Or a curse meant to keep men away. Before Edward could answer, the door burst open. A figure filled the frame, tall, broad-shouldered, with skin tanned by years at sea and a beard flecked with salt. His coat was patched, but carried the dignity of command. "Edward Blackthorne," the man growled. "Still chasing phantoms, I see." Edward smiled despite himself. "Captain Elias Crow. I had not thought to find you in Alexandria." Crow strode in, eyeing the map. Word travels fast in the port. An English scholar buys a strange map at an auction, and already sailors whisper that he seeks Nos A'd. Do you know what they say of that place? That it does not exist? Edward challenged. That it swallows ships whole, Crow replied. Every decade some fool claims to have found its path. None return. Edward leaned forward, fire in his eyes. But none had this map. Crow studied him, then the carved wood. He saw the determination in Edward's gaze, and perhaps the promise of coin. Finally, he grunted. "If you're mad enough to chase this, you'll need a ship. Mine leaves for Aden in a fortnight. If you can pay, we'll sail south. But mark me, scholar, the sea does not forgive." For the next days, Edward and Layla pored over the map. They discovered details that astounded them. Tiny carvings of whirlpools, storm spirals, and reefs that matched no known charts, but hinted at dangers only a cartographer at sea could have recorded. The workmanship was exquisite, each notch, and groove deliberate. Whoever carved it had risked his life for every line dot at night. Edward dreamed of Nos A'd. He saw a throne rising from the sea, waves breaking upon steps of stone, and a crown that glimmered with cold light. He awoke each time with his heart racing, torn between fear and hunger for the truth. By the eve of departure, rumors of the map had spread. Men approached Edward in taverns, offering gold to buy it. Others muttered that the map was cursed, that the merchant who owned it had gone mad before his death. Layla urged caution, but Edward refused to part with it. At last, under the pale light of dawn, Edward, Layla, and the carved map boarded Captain Crow's ship, the Sovereign. The crew eyed them with suspicion, whispering of cursed voyages. Crow gave no speeches, only barked orders as sails unfurled and the harbor of Alexandria shrank behind them. The map lay secured in Edward's cabin, its carved seas gleaming faintly in the morning light. As the ship turned south toward the Red Sea, Edward felt the weight of history pressing upon him. He did not know whether Nos A'd would bring him glory or ruin, only that the path lay carved before him, etched in wood and sealed by fate. The Sovereign cut through the waters of the Red Sea like a blade. Its sails swelled against the desert winds, creaking with the burden of destiny. The ship was no stranger to peril. She bore scars from storms and pirate cannon fire, but this voyage carried a weight unlike any other. The crew whispered of curses, of an island that had swallowed fleets whole, and of a carved wooden map locked in the cabin of a stubborn Englishman. Edward Blackthorne spent his days hunched over that map. The smooth surface of the wood glowed like honey in the lantern light, every carved line a thread pulling him deeper into mystery. Layla al-Nasser sat beside him, her fingers tracing ancient script. She translated fragments, her voice low, as though the words themselves might rouse something listening in the dark. "Follow the current of the serpent's tongue," she murmured. "Where 3 stars kiss the horizon, the sea shall open. Its hidden path." Edward leaned closer. A hidden path. A passage no charts record. Or a metaphor, she replied sharply. Myth and warning often entwine. Edward smiled faintly. And yet every myth has a kernel of truth. That is what we chase. Above deck, Captain Elias Crow stood at the prow, pipe clamped between. His teeth, his eyes hard on the horizon. He had agreed to this voyage for coin, but a sailor of his years did not ignore whispers of doom. Each day, he watched the crew grow more restless. They were a mixed lot, Arabs from Aden, Greeks from Crete, 2 Irishmen who claimed to have sailed the Horn of Africa, and a half-dozen English sailors, hardened by years of naval service. They were men accustomed to storms, but not to scholars dragging them toward ghosts. One evening, as the sun drowned in crimson waves, a storm broke over the Sovereign. The sky split with lightning, and the sea rose like a beast. Rain hammered the deck, blinding the men. Reef the sails. Secure the lines. Crow roared, his voice carrying through the chaos. Edward clung to the cabin doorway, drenched as the ship pitched and rolled. Layla braced against the wall, pointed at the map. Look, here, this spiral carved into the sea. It marks this very storm. Edward's eyes widened. The map had predicted it. Every ridge and groove was not mere decoration, but a warning, etched by a hand that had known the fury of the sea. The crew fought through the night, and by dawn the storm passed, leaving the Sovereign battered but afloat. Yet the men were shaken. They had seen the map consulted during the storm, and whispers spread like fire. The map knew. Days passed. The carved directions guided them along currents the men swore did not exist. When the wind died, the sea itself seemed to pull them onward, as though obeying the etched grooves of the wooden slab. One night, under a sky spangled with stars, Edward stood on deck, the map in hand. Layla pointed upward. There, she whispered. 3 stars aligned, Orion's belt. And here, carved, at the map's edge, when 3 stars kiss the horizon, the sea shall open its hidden path. Edward's breath caught. You mean this is the moment? Before Layla could answer, a cry rang out from the crow's nest. Land, land to the east. But there should have been no land. According to every known chart, only endless water lay in that direction. Yet as dawn painted the horizon, they saw it, the faint rise of jagged rocks, exactly where the map had promised. The crew erupted into shouts. Some cheered, others muttered prayers. Crow's face darkened. He knew this meant the map was no fraud, and that meant the legends might not be, either. But not all dangers lay in waves and storms. As provisions dwindled, discontent festered. Some sailors muttered that the scholar's obsession endangered them all. One evening, Edward found himself confronted by Thomas Riggs, a red-haired Englishman with a scar across his jaw. This voyage is cursed, Riggs spat, slamming his fist on the table where the map lay. We've followed your phantom charts. Into waters no man should sail. Half the men want to turn back. Edward's jaw tightened. If you turn back, you return empty-handed. But if we succeed? Success? Riggs barked a laugh. You think this Nos A'd will welcome us with treasure? I say it'll be bones and wrecks. Before Edward could retort, Captain Crow stepped into the cabin. His voice was calm, but iron. Back to your post, Riggs. You'll not stir mutiny in my ship. Riggs glared but obeyed, muttering curses as he left. Crow looked at Edward. You'd best keep that map close, scholar. Too many eyes on it. And mark me, the sea punishes hubris. I've seen men undone for less than chasing a ghost island. Edward nodded, but said nothing. His heart, though uneasy, beat faster with each mile eastward. Weeks passed, and the Sovereign sailed farther into the unknown. They passed islands, not marked on any European chart. Low atolls crowned with palms, volcanic peaks smoking against the sky, reefs glittering like teeth beneath the waves. Each one was carved on the map, proof of its truth. Layla translated more of the inscriptions. Here, the Isle of Nos A'd, where the throne of tides waits. But he who takes the crown shall be silenced forever. Edward frowned. Silenced? She met his gaze. Perhaps not a crown of gold, but of death. Edward laughed lightly, though unease gnawed at him. Or perhaps a crown of power. Every warning is also temptation. One night, as the moon bled silver over the waves, Edward dreamt again. He stood on an island shore, waves lapping at his feet. Before him rose a crown of stone and coral, humming with strange energy. Behind it loomed a throne carved into a cliff, the sea pounding at its base. A voice whispered in a tongue he did not know, and yet he understood. The sea takes back what is stolen. He awoke trembling, sweat cold on his skin. The map lay beside him, glowing faintly in the moonlight, as though alive. The breaking point came when a sailor was lost. The sovereign had sailed into a fog dense as wool, the world vanishing into white. Bells tolled to keep men steady, but the sea was treacherous. A shout, a splash, and then silence. One man gone, swallowed by the mist. Fear turned to rage. Riggs again stood before Edward, knife in hand. Enough! This map leads only to death. I'll end it here. Before he could strike, Captain Crow leveled his pistol. Stand down, Riggs, or join the sea. Riggs hesitated, then spat at the deck and stormed off. But the threat lingered. Layla placed a hand on Edward's arm. They will kill for this map. You must see that. Edward's gaze hardened. Then we must reach Nos A'd before they do. Once we find it, all doubts will be silenced. At last, after nearly 2 months at sea, the water around them grew. Calm, unnaturally so. The wind died, yet the ship drifted forward as though drawn. The sea glowed faintly beneath, as if lit from within. Crow muttered a prayer, his hands gripping the rail. By God, what waters are these? Edward stood. At the prow, eyes wide. Ahead, the fog thinned, and beyond it rose a silhouette, a dark, jagged island crowned with mist. Layla whispered, voice trembling. Nos A'd. The crew fell silent, staring at the impossible. The island that no map should bear, the island of whispers and death, loomed before them. Edward's heart raced. At last, the journey carved into the wood had led them here. The throne of tides, the crown of silence, the truth that would make his name eternal. All awaited on that shore dot, and yet, as the island's cliffs rose higher, a chill deeper than fear seized him. For in his dreams, the sea had spoken. And he knew, in some buried corner of his soul, that the sea never lied. The morning the sovereign anchored off Nos A'd, the sea lay eerily still, as though holding its breath. The island rose like a jagged crown from the water, cliffs dark with basalt and veined with green. Mist clung to its peaks, swirling in. The sun like smoke. For the crew, hardened men who had faced storms and cannon fire, it was a sight that froze their voices. No chart marked this place. No sailor in any port had spoken of it with certainty. And yet here it was, looming like a memory dredged from the deep. Edward Blackthorne stood at the rail, his hands trembling on the carved wooden map. His entire life of searching, doubting, and chasing whispers had led him here. He felt as though the sea itself had judged him worthy. Layla al-Nasser's voice was soft, almost reverent. The inscriptions were true. Nos A'd exists. Beside them, Captain Crow spat into the sea, his jaw tight. God help us. Sometimes it's better when legends remain dead. The crew lowered boats, their oars cutting the glassy water. As they neared shore, Edward noticed the silence. No cries of seabirds, no rustle of wind in palms. Only the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. They landed on a narrow strip of black sand. Inland, the jungle loomed dense, its trees gnarled and roots twisting like serpents. Yet it was not untouched wilderness. Stone blocks jutted from the undergrowth, remnants of walls and roads swallowed by vines. Edward's eyes widened. A civilization? Here? Layla knelt beside a block, brushing moss away to reveal carvings. Her fingers traced the symbols. They matched the inscriptions on the map. This was the work of the same people. Whoever carved your map once ruled here. Crow scanned the tree line, hand on his cutlass. Ruins or not, we move carefully. No telling what beasts crawl these woods. They pushed into the jungle, hacking at vines, sweat stinging their eyes. The path rose toward the cliffs, where faint outlines of colossal statues emerged out at last. They broke into a clearing and froze. Before them towered stone figures, twice the height of a man, their features eroded by centuries, but still regal. Each held a carved globe, etched with seas and currents. Their eyes, though blank, seemed to follow intruders with silent judgment. Edward's heart pounded. Navigators. Guardians of the sea, Layla whispered. An entire culture devoted to mapping the waters. But where are they now? Crow muttered. Dead and gone, or worse. They pressed on, deeper into the ruins. They passed crumbling walls covered in bas-reliefs, ships sailing through storms, men bowing before thrones, waves swallowing palaces. Always the same motif returned, a crown carved in coral and stone, resting on an altar god at last. In the shadow of a cliff, they found a temple half buried in vines. Its entrance yawned like a mouth. Torches flickered as they entered, the air heavy with damp and age. Inside, the walls gleamed faintly with mineral veins. Carvings covered every surface, maps upon maps, seas twisting into spirals, dotted with ships and monstrous waves. At the center of the chamber lay a raised dais. On it rested the object that silenced them all. The crown of silence. It was no ordinary crown. Forged of coral, obsidian, and some gleaming metal unknown to Edward, it pulsed faintly with a dull light. Its shape was jagged, unnatural, as though grown rather than crafted. Around it lay the skeletons of men, their bones twisted, skulls gaping. Toward the crown, as if in eternal plea, the crew recoiled, crossing themselves. Riggs, his face pale but eyes hungry, whispered, "Treasure." Layla's voice trembled as she translated the inscription on the dais. "He who takes the crown shall bind himself to the sea. His voice will be silenced, his will consumed." Edward felt a chill, yet awe overwhelmed him. He stepped closer, his breath shallow. This is it. Proof of an ancient civilization, proof of legend. With this, history will remember my name. Crow's voice snapped like a whip. "Step back, Blackthorn. Can you not see the warning? This thing is cursed." But Edward's eyes were fixed on the crown. Cursed or protected? They feared its power. Perhaps it was meant for one who could master it. Layla grabbed his arm. "Edward, listen to me. The map was not a guide to glory. It was a warning. Every line, every carving, it was meant to keep men away." He wrenched free. "You cannot stop me." As they argued, shadows stirred in the corners of the chamber. A low hum filled the air, resonating in the stone. One of the crew cried out as a skeleton shifted, its bony hand collapsing to dust. The crown glowed brighter, casting jagged light across the walls. Riggs, eyes wild, lunged forward. "If he won't take it, I will." Crow's cutlass flashed, blocking him. "Touch it and you'll damn us all." In the chaos, Edward's hand reached out and brushed the crown. The chamber shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling, and a roar like 1,000 waves filled the air. Edward stumbled back, clutching his head, his eyes wide with terror and ecstasy. "I hear it," he gasped. "The sea, it speaks." The ground split, and water burst upward in streams. The skeletons crumbled to ash, their warning fulfilled. The crown pulsed like a living heart, its glow spreading into the walls. "Out!" Crow bellowed. "Back!" To the shore. They fled, the jungle trembling around them. Statues toppled, roots tore free, and the air grew thick with mist. Behind them, Edward staggered, torn between flight and obsession. Layla dragged him forward, shouting above the din. "Leave it! Leave the crown, or we all die." But Edward's gaze was fevered. "No, this is mine. The sea has chosen me." They burst onto the beach. The Sovereign anchored offshore. The crew scrambled into boats as the ground shook beneath their feet. From the cliffs came a rumble like thunder, and the very island seemed to writhe. Edward turned back one last time, his eyes fixed on the glowing crown within the collapsing temple. Crow seized him by the collar. "Damn you, Blackthorn! You'll kill us all." Edward tore free, stumbling toward the ruins. Layla cried out, but he vanished into the mist. Moments later, the cliffs split, sending boulders crashing into the sea. The survivors rowed desperately back to the ship, hearts pounding, as Nos A'd groaned like a beast awakening. On deck, drenched and trembling, Layla whispered the words. Etched on the map, the sea takes back what is stolen. And as the island's mist thickened, she knew they had only seen the beginning of the curse. Asterisk. The Sovereign rocked violently at anchor as the ground beneath Nos A'd convulsed. The jungle roared with collapsing trees. Cliffs cracked like breaking bones, and geysers of steam hissed into the air. The once still waters now churned, boiling. As if alive, from the deck, sailors shouted in terror as the island split, sending waves slamming against the hull. Captain Elias Crow barked orders, his voice carrying through the chaos. "Raise anchor, ready the sails. If we stay here, the island will drag us down with it." But Edward Blackthorn was not aboard. He stumbled through the collapsing ruins, the temple shattering around him. The crown of silence pulsed in his hands, its glow searing into his skin. The hum he had heard earlier now thundered in his skull, drowning all thought. Voices, endless, hollow, filled him. The cries of drowned sailors, the whispers of currents, the laughter of storms. He fell to his knees, clutching the crown to his chest. "I hear you. I will obey. I will be your vessel." Outside, Layli al-Nasser screamed his name from the shore. "Edward, leave it. You'll die." Her voice barely pierced the roar in his head. He turned toward the light, eyes glazed, lips moving soundlessly. His voice, his very ability to speak, was gone. The crown had taken it, as the inscription had warned. On the Sovereign, Riggs and the crew fought to lower boats. The men were panicked, some insisting they flee without their scholar, others demanding to wait. Riggs snarled, eyes wild. "This is folly. He's already dead, or worse. That crown is ours for the taking." Crow struck him hard across the jaw, sending him sprawling. "You fool! That crown's a curse. If you value your soul, you'll row, not steal." Riggs spat blood, glaring, but obeyed, his courage breaking under the captain's fury. Meanwhile, Edward staggered from the ruins, the crown blazing on his brow. The temple behind him collapsed fully, swallowed by the earth. Around him, the statues of navigators toppled one by one, their stone globes shattering against the rocks. Layla and two sailors ran to drag him toward the boats. But as they touched him, a surge of unnatural force flung them back. Edward turned slowly, his eyes glowing faintly blue, his lips sealed in silence. The sea rose unnaturally at his feet, licking toward him like a hound greeting its master. Waves crashed not with random fury, but in rhythm, as though obeying his presence. Layla's blood ran cold. The crown has bound him. He's become its servant. Edward raised a hand, trembling but compelled, and the water obeyed. The sea surged, hurling a boat into the air and smashing it against the rocks. Screams echoed as men were swept into the tide. Crow drew his cutlass, jaw clenched. He's no longer our friend. He's the sea's puppet. The survivors scrambled back to the Sovereign, rowing furiously as waves rose higher. From the deck, Men hauled them aboard. Layla collapsed, coughing seawater, her eyes fixed on Edward still standing at the shore. Crow climbed beside her, dripping and furious. "We can't save him." But Layla's hands shook as she clutched the map, now glowing faintly like the crown. "No, the map is tied to the crown." It was never a guide, Crow. It was a warning, carved by the cartographer who saw this fate and sought to keep others away. If we destroy it, perhaps the crown loses its hold. Crow looked grimly toward Edward, who now raised both arms. From the sea, wrecks long buried stirred, their rotting masts piercing the waves like skeletal fingers. Ghostly silhouettes of drowned sailors climbed the phantom decks, their hollow eyes fixed on the living. A fleet of the dead rose around Nos A'd. The crew of the Sovereign gasped in horror. Some fell to their knees, praying. Others scrambled for weapons, though no blade could pierce mist and loam. Crow's jaw set. "Then we end it. The crown, the map, or both. But how?" Layla's eyes blazed. Into the island's heart. The fissure, where the earth is swallowing itself. Cast it back to where it came. Crow nodded once, grim determination in his eyes. "Then God help us we go back." The Sovereign battled monstrous waves to approach the shore once more. Men wept openly, begging to turn back, but Crow's iron command held them together. Layla clutched the map, wrapped in oilskin, her lips. Moving in prayer dot as they neared land, Edward turned toward them. His eyes glowed brighter, the crown shimmering. He lifted his hand, and the sea heaved, dragging the Sovereign toward jagged rocks. "Brace!" Crow bellowed. The ship shuddered, timbers groaning, but did not break. With a final desperate lunge, they grounded close enough for men to leap ashore. Crow, Layla, and 3 sailors sprinted toward the fissure, dodging falling boulders and geysers of steam. The island was tearing itself apart. Behind them, Edward moved inexorably, the crown pulsing. The sea followed him inland, rivers of salt water flooding the jungle. Ghostly sailors marched at his side, their chains dragging through the sand. The fissure, the earth yawned wide, glowing with molten fire. Heat blasted their faces, the roar deafening. Layla held the map above the abyss, her hands trembling. Edward appeared at the edge, silent, his gaze fixed on the crown. He raised his arms, and the ghostly fleet wailed, their voices hollow and endless. Crow shouted over the roar, "Do it, girl! Cast it in!" But Edward, though voiceless, projected a will that clawed into Layla's mind. She saw visions, herself crowned, ruling the seas, her name eternal. She staggered, torn between fear and temptation. Crow seized her shoulders. "Listen to me. You're stronger than him, stronger than the sea. End it." With a cry, Layla hurled the wooden map into the fissure. The air split with a scream, not human, but vast, as though the sea itself howled. The crown on Edward's brow flared, then cracked. Edward staggered, clutching his head. For a heartbeat, clarity returned to his eyes. He mouthed silently, "Help me, Dot," but the fissure widened. With a final roar, the crown shattered into shards of coral and light. Edward's body convulsed, then collapsed. The ghostly fleet dissolved into mist, the waves subsided, and silence fell. The survivors fled to the shore, hauling Edward's limp body. But as they laid him on the sand, they saw his chest still. His lips parted, but no sound came. He was gone, his voice taken forever by the sea. Crow lowered his head, muttering a prayer. Layla wept silently, clutching Edward's lifeless hand. Behind them, Nos A'd shuddered one final time. With a thunderous roar, the island crumbled, collapsing into the sea. Waves surged, swallowing jungle, cliffs, and ruins alike. When the spray cleared, nothing remained but endless water. Nos A'd was gone, As though it had never existed, the sovereign limped back across the waters, battered but alive. The crew spoke little, their eyes haunted. Rigs had vanished during the chaos, swept away by the sea. Only a handful survived to tell the tale. In her cabin, Layla sat alone, the weight of the memory pressing her. She had no crown, no map, only scars and the knowledge of what she had seen. She began to write, her quill scratching against parchment, recording the warning anew. The map of the lost cartographer was not meant to guide men to riches. It was a warning, etched in wood, carved in fear, to keep others from repeating his doom. The sea takes back what is stolen, and it silences those who defy it. Captain Crow delivered Edward's belongings to the British consulate, but he never spoke of Nos A'd again. In every port thereafter, when sailors whispered of ghost islands and cursed crowns, Crow would smoke his pipe and mutter only, "The sea has its secrets. Best leave them buried." As for Layla, she returned to Cairo, where she locked her account away in a library vault. Generations might doubt it, dismissing it as fable. But she knew better. Sometimes, in her dreams, she still heard the faint hum of waves, whispering promises of crowns and thrones. She woke each time with a shiver, whispering the words etched on a lost map. The sea takes back what is stolen, and she prayed no one would ever find another like it.